Out of control inflation is going to crash everything. I'm Biko Konstantinos, and that's what we're going to talk about today. My mission is to support your investing and financial goals through quality education and market analysis. So if that sounds good to you, please subscribe to my channel, and if you enjoy this video, please give it a like as well. Inflation in America has risen 6.2% for the 12 months up to October 2021. These figures have sounded some very large alarm bells as inflation is no longer being contained, and the results, if it goes out of control, could be devastating to the global economy at large. This article from the New York Times shows us the rapid rise of inflation since 2020. This level is much higher than the 2% average that the Fed in America is aiming for. So what is inflation? According to The Balance, inflation is the sustained upward movement in the overall price level of goods and services in the economy. So the result of inflation is that it takes more money to buy the same amount of goods and services than it did in the past. As a very simple example, 10 years ago, you might have been able to buy a 2-liter bottle of milk for $1, and 10 years later, that same bottle of milk may now cost $2.50. So that's a direct result of inflation. Now, if inflation is rising at a level faster than your wages are increasing, it means that you can actually afford less with your money. Each day there is a gap between the inflation rate and your wages increase. So this is what's so worrying about out of control inflation. So how did we get here? This interview from Thomas Honig provides a good explanation.
What brought us here? Number one, we have had, as people have been talking about, these supply disruptions that are becoming more endemic into the economy. That includes goods for manufacturing, the inputs that have been slow in coming. We have international trade that we're trying to rebuild, seeing energy come up, and we're trying to do with global warming. So we're trying to impede the growth of energy use, and yet that has also slowed investment so that our energy is going up in price. So these things are having an effect. And on the other side of it, you've had nearly $6 trillion of government spending brought into the economy to address the COVID. Some of that absolutely essential, but it is major increases in spending, and those are increasing demand. And people, when they receive this, they put some of that in savings, so that's being spent now. So you have this enormous demand shock and supply shock, which has created this very strong inflationary environment. And it will be a struggle to rebalance that over time. And so I think we have some inflation ahead of us as well.
So what's the ramifications if we have this period of higher inflation? Well, basically, everything's going to go up. As everything gets more expensive, people have less money left after they've purchased what they need to purchase. If someone has money in the bank, they might be earning 0.5% interest. Now, if inflation is rising 4 or 6%, they're basically losing about 5% value from the money that they hold in the bank. That's a real issue for many pensioners or elderly who might have significant money saved in the bank, who used to get much higher levels of interest. Billionaire Ray Dalio agrees that real wealth is being eroded due to raging inflation, and also believes that the US is on the wrong path regarding inflation. So how are policymakers going to get inflation under control again? For many, many months they've been saying interest rates are going to stay very low, we're going to take a very long path, and we're not going to look at raising rates for 2-3 years or whatever the date is. Now, this could be coming back to bite them as we start to see inflation spiral out of control. Jack Dorsey of Twitter is also very concerned about inflation and even mentioned hyperinflation, which occurs when inflation can spiral out of control and can even destroy currencies. It seems like some policymakers are hoping and praying that when some of these bottlenecks are worked through and resolved, that inflation will just start to return back to normal. They kept mentioning transient, that it's only going to be here for a period and then return back to normal. But if this doesn't happen, what else can they do? Are they going to look at raising interest rates to make sure it doesn't get out of control? And if that happens, what's the effect going to be on the housing market, on the stock markets, and even on the economy in general? So that seems to be the dilemma now for these global policymakers, and they seem to have painted themselves in a very difficult corner. So what about Australia? The RBA promised many times that interest rates weren't going to rise until around 2024. And this is probably just one of those other factors that has added extra fuel to the already overheated property market in Australia. New Zealand are already considering raising interest rates either this year or very early next year. And some other countries around the world have already started raising interest rates. Australia can't avoid rising inflation. If you just look around and consider what things are costing now compared to what they were previously, then you'll know that inflation is definitely on the rise, and it's probably a lot higher than what the actual official figures say. And that's the same in the US. On the ground, I'm hearing lots of reports that the real inflation, the actual price of goods that people have to buy, is a lot more than the official rate of rise that's being announced. So is uncontrolled inflation going to be the catalyst that crashes the property market, that crashes the stock market? It'd be great if you could let me know what you think by leaving a comment below. I don't believe that this phenomenon is just a temporary blip and it'll just go back to normal. Decisions will have to be made, and whatever decisions are made, there's going to be consequences. If interest rates are raised faster than earlier predicted, that will definitely put a damper on the property market and most likely the stock market as well. It could even lead to some significant corrections in those markets. However, if nothing's really done and inflation actually spirals out of control, that could be even worse for the global economy at large. I'm Biko Konstantinos. I really appreciate you watching this video, and I'll catch you next time.